welcome to the regular meeting of the Board of Finance, May 13th, 2025. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome tonight. We have Jen Castellano. Did I say that? Castellano from Millman to talk about the OPEB pension plan. We have a trust fund established that we believe is essentially funded or mostly funded, and we're going to talk about, but we have not been using it as the fund to which retirement benefits come and go. So the question is, how can we utilize the fund and what does that look like and what are the pros and advantages of using or not using the fund? And just to walk us through in general, I think for members of the public, if you could just let us know what OPEB is and how it's funded, and very basic, speak to the public as well.
Sure. So what OPEB is benefits, post-employment benefits, health benefits, primarily health and dental benefits for retirees of the town. So people who used to work for the town, they've retired and they're receiving medical and dental benefits through the town. The town pays a portion of those benefits. The retirees pay a portion of their share as well, just like active employees do as well. So that's what that is. Up until about 15-ish so years ago, OPEB benefits weren't really recognized on the balance sheet or the books for any municipalities. New accounting standards were released that required those to be recognized. So then we started doing biennial actuarial evaluations to value the liability of the OPEB benefits, just like we do for the pension plans. Eventually, the town decided to open up a trust to pre-fund those benefits. So up until now, what the town has been doing is paying those benefits as they become due each year. So retirees have a certain number of claims or premiums that are being paid to provide those benefits in any given year, and the town pays those, and that flows to the budget. Okay. In the interim, the town has been funding this trust fund to help to offset those costs in the future. And you've been putting money aside into this trust fund to pay those benefits in the future. Just like you do, so think about the pension plan. The pension plan has a trust fund, and when retirees receive their monthly benefits every week, the money comes directly out of that trust fund and goes right to retirees. We're at the point now, because the plan is so well funded, that the town should consider doing that as well for the OPEB plan. So using the trust to pay those benefits. That's why you've been putting the money away. You've done a great job of putting the money away over the last decade plus. Now it's time to start utilizing that. And so I'm here today to walk through what that will look like and what the impact will be on the town's finances as a result.
And Jen, just for the public, how is OPEB funded? Employees, employer, interest?
It's funded just like a pension plan is. The town puts in contributions, employees put in contributions, and there's the plan's assets are invested according to an investment policy statement that the town has set, and that those funds earn investment earnings over time. Most of the benefits are paid through investment earnings, and the remaining amounts are paid through contributions, whether they be employer contributions or employee contributions.
And the annually determined contribution, what is that and what makes that up?
The actuarially determined contribution is something that we calculate every year for the town. It's comprised of three main parts. The first part is what we call the normal cost. So that's the value of benefits being earned by active employees in the upcoming year. The second component is what we call the past service costs. That's an amortization of the unfunded liability. And the unfunded liability is you compare the assets in the trust fund to the liability that we measure. And to the extent that the assets are less than the liability, there's an unfunded liability there. And that's being paid down over a period of time, such that the trust fund becomes fully funded. And then the third component is just a small interest component that takes into account the fact that we calculate the contribution as of a certain date, but the town doesn't actually put it in until about a year later. So it's just a timing component there.
So even when a fund is fully funded, you still take into account what employees owe, and that still needs to be funded what the town owes.
That's correct. And if the plan is overfunded, then you're allowed to use that surplus to help offset some of what the employees earn during the year, during that normal cost component.
Could you just, exactly what comes out? OPEB is what, other pension and employee benefits?
Yep, other post-employment
Other
benefits.
post-employment, what, you say are paid out, exactly what is paid out?
So for retirees that are under age 65, the town self-insures those insurance claims. So the retirees go to the doctors, they put in a
So
claim.
health insurance as well?
Health insurance, yeah.
I'm looking for the categories.
Yeah, health insurance.
One is health insurance.
Dental
Other-
insurance,
What else is there?
Dental.
prescription, drug,
And life insurance.
Those three.
life insurance possibly, yeah, I can't
Four.
remember.
I don't think we have.
Can't remember if the town has life insurance.
So there are three things that come out of it.
Correct.
Eye stuff? Vision? Is there a vision plan on it?
Don't
No.
think that's covered under OPEB.
It's just dental and health.
And disability, any disability?
Disability is covered through either the pension plan or a self-disability insurance. It's not covered under here.
So why don't you start us and you can
Okay.
see we're not shy to ask questions.
Yes, please interrupt as I go along. Some of this, it's in my presentation, I've kind of partially covered, but I'm gonna go over it again. So here's the fundamental funding formula for any OPEB plan. This is the same for pension plans as well. This formula, you'll see there's two components on the left, two components on the right. This formula must always be in balance for it to really be utilized properly. So first and foremost, the benefits paid. We can calculate the benefits paid based on the provisions of the plan. We know what retirees are entitled to. As an actuary, we apply different assumptions as to when people will retire, die, and so on and so forth, and we can estimate the benefits that are going to be paid out in the future. We calculate those benefits, we discount them back to today's dollars and come up with a liability.
So, I'm sorry,
Sorry.
is our retiree health plan self-insured as well?
The pre-65 plan, so for those under age 65, it's self-insured. For those that are past age 65 and eligible for Medicare, they're on a Medicare supplement plan, which is fully insured.
But post, we're now using a Medicare Advantage plan for the town?
So we did switch to a Medicare Advantage on January 1st, I believe, and that's reflected in our most recent valuation.
Teachers use the teacher retirement health, but we subsidize some of their
Correct.
contribution costs, is that right?
That is correct. The second component of things so benefits are paid out of the trust, will eventually be paid out of the trust. Expenses are also paid out of the trust, okay? What goes into the trust are investment income. You know, like I said, the trust is invested and it earns investment income over time. And then as your actuary, we solve for the contributions that need to be made over each year so that these benefits can be paid, okay?
Sorry to keep interrupting, besides benefits, what are the expenses? I mean, the expenses of running the fund, the managing the fund.
Right, so you have investment expenses, you have different administrative expenses such as paying us, paying your auditors, paying any attorney's fees that may come out, things of that nature.
Premiums to the Medicare Advantage plan?
Those are the benefits. The premiums that are being paid, the claims that are being paid are the benefits. To the extent you're insuring excess claims with stop loss, your TPA, access to the network, those are all parts of that's the benefit provided. The expenses are what you're paying your professional service advisors. Okay, so we solve for the contributions that need to be paid. So I have benefits paid in gray because right now the benefits are not coming out of the trust. They're being paid directly by the town. They're set aside through some internal fund, and it's being budgeted through your annual budgeting process currently, okay? That's your current approach. So under that approach, how are OPEB costs reflected in your operating budget on an annual basis? So the impact on your budget from OPEB, there's two main components. It's the benefits that you're paying, right? Net of whatever retiree's portion of the costs, right? So the town pays a share, the retirees pay a share. So that's the first component. And the second component is the town's contribution to the OPEB trust that we calculate every year, okay?
Jen, where is that? Is that in the health insurance fund? I mean, where are we paying those out of?
General fund.
General fund? Where does that show as an expenditure in the budgets?
It shows right under our art contribution, it'll show the town contribution, the police contribution, and if there is an OPEB, then it'll show that, but we haven't had a contribution in the last couple of years.
That's in the transfer section?
It's in the employee benefits section.
Employee benefit section, okay.
So that formula back there, it seemed to imply that the trust is not paying for it, it's actual payments from
That's
our
correct.
budget plus contributions.
Correct.
Those are the costs.
So currently, the town's budget related to OPEB is consisting of the payment, the claims that are being paid every year, claims and premiums that are being paid every year, you're paying those directly.
Yep.
Those can fluctuate
Sure.
with any given year, cause volatility in your budget, I'm sure,
Mhm.
right? And then the town's contribution to the OPEB trust, which we calculate every single year.
So the trust isn't paying.
Not yet, and that's, we're here to discuss
Okay.
That's what she wants
moving
us to
towards,
do.
moving in that
So
direction.
cause I'm an actuary, so like I normally just think of it as like you're funding something and then that thing is going to actually pay
Right.
it. This is different because you're funding a contribution to get that trust up to a certain level, and while that's happening, you're
Right.
paying
When the-
cash the actual
Right, when the
benefit.
trust was first created, there was not enough money to pay even a year's worth of payments.
I
So
gotcha.
So the point was to pre-fund it. And
Build it up.
we'll talk about that mechanism in the next slide here, and then now we're at the point where we've built it up, let's start taking advantage of it.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so under the current approach, the town's contribution, how do we calculate the town's contribution? The way I talked about at the beginning of this session, we calculate the accrued liability, right? And for the fiscal year '26, this is as of July 1st, 2024, the accrued liability was about 24 million. The market value of assets as of July 1st, 2024 was just over 24 million. So the plan was slightly overfunded by about $300,000. So we amortized that over the
Jim, this
remaining.
says the OPEB trust for 2026, was that,
This is for the contribution for fiscal year '26.
this is the first time we're seeing this, when do we,
We gave estimates to earlier. It's zero either way, so.
The estimates were used as part of our budget, the valuation is not complete yet, you do not have the final report.
so this is not the final report?
These are the final numbers because because it's gonna be zero either way.
Could we get those earlier? I mean, we don't want to budget estimates
Well,
if we
it's
can
a matter of
avoid
when we get data from the town.
it. So I've spoken with Mark, he's gonna talk with HR to make sure you get it. If we want it in December, when do you need the information?
Ideally by September, October, the latest.
Can you make that happen now that we have a fully funded HR?
That's exactly right, yes, thank you.
Thank you, it'd be nice to have that for the tri-board, since that's a fixed cost. Like to see it at zero, but okay.
How far off has it been on an annual basis? You haven't made a big deal out of it, so I assume it wasn't that far off.
No, the last few years, we haven't even had to pay anything, and then before that, I mean, I think the largest swing we've had is maybe like 50,000 or something, it's super
Okay,
small,
got it.
yeah.
Good periods of investment income though,
Yeah,
during that period of time,
Yeah.
so.
Oh, we've had some bad periods
Did you?
too, oh yeah, over the 6 years, we've had a
Our
couple.
estimate always reflects the investment
Yeah, they do
experience,
this
cause
in
we
the
have
range,
that early, cause Amy's able to get that to me on really early. It's just the liability gets delayed because we need the data on the members.
And so when you do the valuations, you know how much we're paying out,
Yeah, well, yes.
even though we're not using the trust to do it.
Well, we don't, it doesn't matter what you're paying out because it's not coming out of the trust.
If it starts coming out of the
Then
trust, it might
then
matter
Amy's gonna
very
start telling me
much.
what you're paying out. We don't need to know what you're paying out because it's not coming out of the trust, so it doesn't impact the asset, the market
So
value
when
of
those
assets.
those assumptions, if they're very different than what you think, that might change the valuation, yes?
It might, once we see what's actually being paid out. I mean, our assumptions are based on our health experts' professional opinion and the plans that you're in. So
They've been pretty close.
they should be fairly close, but we'll see what better once we start getting information on an annual basis, and we'll compare it and we'll see if we need to tweak anything.
Jen, just one last thing, I know you're sorry to interrupt, but the last time we did an experience study was, I think, 2022.
Yeah.
So we may be, if you follow GFOA every 3 years, we're pretty close to needing one again. Does it make sense to do that in lockstep with this transition?
I don't, so the experience study is is looking at demographic experience, not the health insurance experience. That we look at every single time. Every valuation, we look at that, we change those assumptions, every single valuation, because that's required from an actual standards of practice.
So we've had recent union negotiations that might change some of your assumptions.
It might, yeah, and if a union, if we find out about any changes in the benefits offered that we think would impact a pattern of retirement or decrementing or anything to that extent, we wouldn't wait for an experience study to change that, we'd probably change that right away.
And you get notified of all union negotiation
So,
contracts.
oftentimes we're involved in quantifying the impact of union negotiations before they're even fully
And she asked
negotiated.
for the amended documents too, when she sends out all of her requests for information.
Perfect.
So she does a double check.
Okay, so
So just to be clear about one thing, the figure for accrued liability, that represents an actuarial estimate of the total cost of providing lifetime benefits and premiums for
yes, as of July
beneficiaries of the
1st,
plan.
2024, correct.
It's
And the
not what we're
expenses.
gonna pay in a single year, for example.
No, right, that's the present value of all future benefits. And then we compared it to the assets as of that same point in time, and so as of right now, as of that point in time, the trust was fully funded, and slightly overfunded. So when we amortized that, there was a slight negative amortization at 26,000 that we can use to offset the normal, what I said, the normal cost, that's the value of benefits being earned by active members. And then there's that small interest component, and that gets you an actuarially determined contribution on line 7 of just over $1 million. Now, because the town is not currently paying benefits from the trust, what we do is we subtract off what we expect the town to pay from that actuarially determined contribution, and that's how we get to the town's contribution under the current method, which is 0. So you see on line 8, we expect benefit payments to be about 1.4 million. We subtract that off. It's not gonna go negative, you're not gonna take, you can't, it's gonna bottom out 0. So the contribution to the trust for fiscal year 26 under the current method is 0.
Amy, what did we pay in benefits? Does that line up?
I don't know off the top of my head, I can get it to you. It's part of that journal entry that we do every year, so we're not using the trust, but we still record the benefit payments into the trust.
So if we switch to using the trust to pay the benefits, how does that change the impact on the town's budget? Well, that first component, the benefit payments, that goes away. Doesn't mean the payments go away, they're just no longer coming out, being paid directly by the town, because the trust is going to
So
pay
that
them.
just disappears out of the budget book, it now goes into the trust, but we still have to pay our annual.
But you still have your town's contribution, so under that method, the town's contribution, again, lines 8 and 9 also go away. So now you would fund the $1.04 million instead. So you see a net difference, so under the old method, your budget was 1.4 million, the expected benefit payments, plus 0 contribution to the trust. Under the new method, it would be an actuarially determined contribution of just over $1 million, and no benefit payments because those are gonna come out of the trust. So you'd have a net savings of about $400,000. Because you're gonna let the trust take that. Now,
Because we're so well funded.
because you're so well funded,
So, Mark, that gets you close to your 3 million.
okay?
It solves a lot of problems.
So that's
No,
just,
that's not coming
I
from
don't
the
know what
general.
year, Jen, what year did the town, or does everybody know, start the trust? Cause
I
it
don't
was probably
recall
one of the best
offhand.
decisions
It was.
ever
I
made
mean,
in the town of Simsbury.
only about half the towns in Connecticut are funding their OPEB. Even have a trust. Of the, of those 50% of towns, I'd say about 30% of them aren't contributing. They have a trust with maybe $100,000 in it and they don't make any contributions to it. Or they make a $50,000 nominal contribution that has no impact. So the town of Simsbury made very good decisions, and has been funding the trust, even though it might have been tough some years with budgets. And you're at the point now where you can benefit it and actually save money in the long term.
Jen, do you happen to know if any municipalities in Connecticut have changed their charter to require a trust be funded? I mean, I know OPEB was a while ago now, so what are municipalities doing to make sure that they do what Simsbury did all those years ago?
Yeah, I don't think I don't know what's requiring it, they're just making the decision to do it. And once you start the trust, that money in the trust is purely for this benefit, you can't take it out and use it for something else. So it's protected, it's protecting the benefit for future retirees.
But until you get it fully funded, it's an independent decision every year by
To
the
actually fund
legislative
it,
branch,
yes.
whether you,
Yes,
what extent
yes.
you're gonna fund
And it's
it.
an easy thing for people to cut when they're having in a tough budget cycle.
We like good stories.
Our town policy is we fund the ARC every year.
And there's some towns that is their policy, and there's others that they're phasing into funding it. They've opened the trust and they can't afford to make the full amount right away, but they're phasing it in over a 5 to 7 year period. There's some that say they're gonna phase it in but then don't. But to the extent you fund the trust, we can use the long-term rate of return on investments as the interest rate assumption, right? Which is we're using a 6.5% interest rate assumption for this plan. If you were not funding the trust, we'd be using a municipal bond rate, which is probably closer to 4.5%.
Right.
Which is much higher liability than $24 million. Okay, so those communities that are not funding are recognizing a much higher liability on their financial statements, and the bond rating agencies can see that they're not funding it. They don't like that. You're funding the 100%, you're 100% funded, like your bond rating agencies aren't even paying attention to your OPEB plan right now.
So we're back to over 100% funded at this point.
Yeah, I mean, on a market value basis, it could, who knows, this is as of July of 2024, so, lots happened since then, and who knows what will be on the July of 2025. But, we are, July 1st, 2025 is a full valuation year, so we'll have fresh numbers and we'll take a look. What we aren't currently doing for the OPEB, which I will recommend we do with the July 1st, 2025 valuation, is smoothing your assets. We're still using a market value of assets.
Over 3 years, how
Probably over 5 years,
5.
just like we do for the pension plan. That way, it'll help to reduce the volatility in the contribution going forward. It hasn't been much of an issue. Because the contribution went to zero,
it was zero.
and it really didn't make a
matter,
difference.
right?
Didn't matter, so we
But like
didn't.
before that, cause we were newly zero,
Yeah, I mean, we could have.
I was curious.
Yeah, we didn't.
Amy, you had, were about to say something about the funding and the savings, do you?
Oh, the $1 million is not a savings to the general fund, it's a savings to the health insurance fund.
How does it go to the health insurance fund?
So that, the health insurance fund pays that 1.4 million in claims. So when they bill us for the claims, that comes out of the health insurance fund, and that's what that 1.4 million would be part of. We pay the premiums into the health insurance fund. So saving
300. How much is the savings?
saving 1.4, I don't think would do a ton to a premium decline on 17 million in claims.
So part of our premium contribution is to pay for those insurance claims, so those would now go towards the trust fund, right?
What do you mean?
Or we're paying money into the health insurance fund.
Right, so our premiums are based on the 17 million in claims. Our claims are now going to be, say, 16 million. But our premiums aren't gonna decrease that much because we're paying 16 million and that extra million is coming out of OPEB now. Like, I don't think that there's gonna be like a huge premium savings on our end.
Well, you
So-
would think that the premium you pay for retirees into the health insurance fund will now be paid into the OPEB fund?
So I think what you wouldn't have to pay any premiums.
Right, we
You
pay the
just-
ARC.
You pay the ARC into the trust fund, and then whatever the
Trust fund pays the premium.
whatever the
Mhm.
claims are for retirees, so you'll track those claims. Say it's $1.4 million, you're gonna take that out of the trust fund and then reimburse the health insurance fund for that.
Mm-hmm.
So anything your town is paying into that fund, you no longer have to pay.
Right, we're just getting rid of the volatility of the premium for the retiree premiums and just replacing it with an ARC payment. So it's not like there's $1 million net savings, there's not, cause we're already paying 1.4 million in claims for those retirees, no matter if we take it out of the health insurance fund or we take it out of the OPEB fund, we still have to pay it.
Except that we're contributing to the health insurance fund and we're gonna stop.
Right.
And we're gonna
So whatever you're
contribute to the.
contributing to the.
Yeah, but we're gonna stop putting the claims in there too,
Right,
right, so it's just a transfer over, it's not a savings.
so general fund to health insurance versus general fund to the OPEB trust, is that your point?
General fund to health insurance. Well, everything is still gonna run through health insurance. It's just the OPEB fund is gonna be able to reimburse our health insurance fund.
But you'll figure out what the impact is to our operating budget, you'll be able to.
Yeah, I mean, so maybe
Isn't it
I thought that's
300?
what you were paying the claims directly out of your budget, but maybe that's not the
No,
case.
not out of the general fund, out of the health insurance fund.
And so how are you determining what the town puts into the health insurance fund for retirees every year?
Lockton comes up with our premiums. So they do the
okay.
retiree premium and they give us our portion, they give us the retiree portion, and then we bill the retiree and then we put in our portion.
Okay. So you won't have to do that anymore.
Right, but now we'll have to put in an arc.
Right, but yeah,
Yeah.
But it is less, the arc. Based on this
No.
valuation.
well, so
For
let's,
Jen.
so this is what the projected benefit payments are.
Right.
From our based on our valuation, these are estimated, so $47.1 million over 20 years of payments to retirees.
Net present values back to that 23 or 24 on the previous page.
Well, net present value is gonna be less because that's for all years, I'm only showing 20 years here,
Okay, got it.
not all future years. And then here's the actual determined contribution projected over the next 20 years, that black line, so it's 28.5 million over 20 years.
So what year are you starting at? I can't see that.
Fiscal year 26. It's just for illustrative purposes, knowing that, we're pretty much fiscal year 26 budget is done.
Pretty much what?
The fiscal year 26 budget is not gonna change at this point in time.
Because it's zero.
Yeah. So this is the difference of what the payments were versus the EDC. So, but maybe that's not, so it's not, maybe our understanding what you are currently doing is not quite there.
We're doing it, but we're doing it like instead of not paying our portion of a premium, you thought that we were just paying the claims in place of it.
Mhm.
And we are, but we're paying the claims out of the health insurance fund and our portion is translated into a monthly premium.
So that'll go away.
Yeah.
If you go back to that previous page we were staring at for a while with the progression of numbers on it. The one before this, I think. It seems to be that if we weren't as funded as we are, in this example, you'd have to probably pay at least the 1.4 in row 8 in a normal year. And you might even have to pay a little more than that to get like your contribution going. So that you
Correct,
can
and that's
fund
what,
that
it was
track.
like that, about 3 or 4 years ago.
Right.
The actuarially determined contribution maybe was 1.6 million. The benefit payments were 1.4, the town contributed 200,000, for example.
So we're saving versus previous years in this particular year, at least 400,000 plus. Right?
So you'd make that contribution and the trust is going to, so another reason for using the trust, right? You're making these contributions to the trust and using the benefits, the trust to pay the benefits, it'll impact those calculations that locked-in makes because that'll go away. And so the trust is gonna absorb the volatility in the claims experience. So let's assume in one particular year, I think in 2030 I did assumed claims went up or $1 million higher than expected. You can see if I go back and forth between these two, that black line doesn't change all that much, right?
Because of the smoothing.
Because of the smoothing, that the actual funding mechanism will smooth that out. So that volatility will go away. You'll just have any volatility that's in your actually determined contribution, but we have mechanisms to smooth that out over time.
And what do we use, where our amortization period is?
So we're currently at 13 years.
We're at year 13 of a 17-year amortization schedule.
Yeah, so we're at 13 years. We're likely getting to the point where we need to rethink that amortization period. I mean, we might look at that with the July 1st, 2025 valuation, especially if you're gonna start using the trust. And if you're in an overfunded position, there's different approaches. Nothing's more volatile than a plan that is just at around 100%.
Why is that? I never understood that.
Because think about it, if you're 40% funded
Yeah.
and you lose 20% in your assets,
right.
Small.
who cares, right? You're still gonna be,
I
you're
don't
gonna be
think that would
35%
make
funded instead of 40% funded. But if you're 100% funded and you lose 20% of your assets, you're gonna go from 100% funded to maybe 90% funded. And then you're gonna go from only having to pay the normal cost to having to pay this this normal cost plus this unfunded liability as well.
Sure.
So it could be very volatile and we wanna protect that when you're in that situation. So we'll see where you land on July 1st, 2025. We might wanna think about that policy to protect that volatility. Smoothing assets is one way to do that, right? The amortization policy is another way to do that, so we'll take a look
Layered
at those.
amortization.
Yeah, layered amortization or a longer period open amortization, because you're overfunded, we wanna kind of preserve that a little bit.
When will you come back to us when will we see you next on that?
Depends on when we get the data for the OPEB valuation.
So we're aiming to
So
get it,
we're aiming for probably
December.
November, December timeframe, yeah, to come
So
back and discuss
get it.
that.
done in December because we'd like to capture those savings in next year's budget.
So any shocks to the claims experience doesn't really impact the EDC all that much. It did, you'll see after 2030, the contribution does go up slightly in those post years because they have to make up for that shock to the trust. But
Is that also because the retirees are aging and the experience would be, you think because the increasing claims is?
the increasing the line, it's because the benefits are just, it's an open plan, there's more people, higher benefits, it's gonna increase with time. That's expected.
As long as it stays an open plan.
Correct. If the plan ever becomes closed, it will increase for a while until you start having fewer actives than retirees, and then it'll eventually start to decline.
So how do you I don't know how to ask this question, but like how did we get here in terms, it's a good place to be because we're funded, right, which is great. How did that happen? Like, is there something conservative in the actuarial valuation that like sort of unravels over time? Is it that our investment returns were really good?
The town did what we recommended they do, you guys do, and you made you made the decision to
If we
open
did
the trust.
exactly what we were supposed to do, what happens if you go do exactly what you were supposed to do? Because it seems like we're gonna like reduce that difference on that, I keep going back to that page, like the difference between the 1 million and the 1.4.
Yeah.
Like, is that gonna keep growing, or it feels like something good happened for this to happen?
Well, I'm sure there was some.
I'm not saying it's bad, like I'm just trying to understand.
So there was, things happen with your health insurance plans, those premiums are adjusting because they're reacting to the claims experience.
Sure.
You did switch to a Medicare Advantage plan this year, that produced a fair amount of savings.
Okay.
Because those plans are not as
rich.
expensive as the Medicare supplement plans. So things happened.
Okay.
You have good investment years, bad investment years, and it all balances out. Actual gains and losses have happened. Because you have 13 years left in your amortization period, we didn't expect you to be at 100% right now, but you are.
Right.
So now we gotta switch gears to how to preserve that best we can.
Yes, yeah.
And we don't wanna just forego everything, we'd rather have steady.
Yes, correct.
Generally.
Yeah, we don't wanna do something that's gonna reduce contributions or anything, cause once you've reduced the contribution, it's hard to get it back up, right?
Yes.
It's easy to reduce it, but it's hard to get it back up, so you wanna,
And your assumption on health, I call it an ARC, but I know it's an EDC, I'm not sure what it's called. But your assumption is 3.5 a year to go up? I saw that in the evaluation report.
it's a very complicated assumption, it's like a 70-year health trend assumption. It starts at something, I think it levels out around between 3.5% to 4% at the tail end, but does take into account current inflationary environment, which changes every 2 years. When we do the valuation every 2 years, the health inflation environment changes drastically, especially lately. And our health actuary, I'm not a health actuary, I'm a retirement actuary, but we have our health actuaries take a look at everything and they give us their best estimates as far as the assumptions that we should
So
put
if
into
we were
our
doing long-term planning, would you tell us plan on your annually determined contribution going up 3.5% a year or steady or?
Well, so the one component of that is 3.5%, so you're talking about the amortization growth rate, so if
Yes.
I go back to this
Yeah.
page.
Sorry.
The footnote at the bottom, you have a 3.5 amortization
Yeah.
growth rate. So what that means is that the amortization of the unfunded accrued liability in the absence of any gains and losses would increase by 3.5% per year.
But since we have no unfunded.
You have no unfunded, so it's that assumption really doesn't make a
Okay.
difference. I might recommend putting that to 0 next valuation, assuming we're still over 100%, because it's easy to do that when you're in a year that doesn't impact you, but it or you could reduce it to maybe 2%, something lower. You really want that to go up with what you expect your tax base to grow by.
What do you expect
Your
your
tax base, right? The town's tax base. If you think it's gonna grow by 3.5% per year, then that's a fine assumption. If you think it's not gonna grow by 3.5% a year, we
No.
should probably lower that.
Yeah. Okay.
Because think about it, this is being funded by taxpayer dollars, and if your tax base only goes up by 2%, but this is going up by 3.5%, you have to make that up somewhere.
Not sustainable.
Yeah, that was the question I was getting at, okay.
So we're at a place now where we can start taking a look at being at 100%, we can look at those things.
That'd be great if you could look at
And I'll come back,
those.
I'll be prepared to come back in December with some options and projections around those options so you can see the impact of those different decisions.
It sort of goes without saying, Mark, we'd also like the pension numbers then too. Okay.
We have the resources we need now for first time in years.
And we'll see nice savings because of it.
So just one more slide I have for you. So the impact on the per-funded ratio under the TIF purchase. So the yellow line is continuing to do what you're doing. The funded ratio is just gonna skyrocket because the plan's gonna, even though you're not gonna be making contributions to the plan anymore, it's gonna continue to earn 6.5% per year, and there's minimal expenses coming out of it. So that's just gonna, because those benefit payments are coming out of it.
You can't use this for anything other than.
You can't use it for anything else. So this is what it's here for. This is why we created it. Let's use it for what, now is the time to use it.
And it still keeps us reliably funded at over 100.
Yeah, and if you start paying benefit payments, that blue line assumes you start paying benefit payments out of the trust, you're at just over 100% funded. We expect you to stay there, assuming no adverse conditions in the market, assuming nothing that changes produces significant gains or losses. We expect you to stay there, because that's the way the funding mechanism is designed, to get to 100% and stay there. So.
But Jen, isn't it also true that if you didn't do that and you continued to go along this path, you would be, whenever you ultimately made the decision to do this, your ARC would be significantly low, right? At some point,
yeah, eventually,
you could make the decision to not change a thing for another couple of years.
You could.
Right? And now that you're fully funded, the other thing you could do is you could determine that you would want to overfund it in years where you've got more than expected grandless growth.
Exactly.
And the return on that is gonna be better than the savings to debt service by not bonding because of the actuarial and the presumed rate of return.
Mhm.
So you're in a really good spot. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it, I can tell you. It's
Yeah,
very,
you are in a spot
proud
that
of
most
whoever and
municipalities wish
whatever
they
and-
were in.
and the consistency with which this has been done is truly remarkable. I mean, kudos.
Jen, following up on Mark's thing, one of the questions we have, we're looking at quite a bit of year-end surplus. And to Mark's point, does it make sense to put some in there and lower the ARC payment even further? So if you could just do that evaluation first too.
To the OPEB?
Or pension,
Yeah, I'm thinking it might make more sense to put it into the pension,
right?
because the pensions are unfunded. It'll have probably a bigger impact, but we can do that analysis and see what
That'd
the
be great.
impact is.
Just as another option instead, because we either put it towards capital or pensions or OPEB to reduce the ARC and to increase the
Your
funding.
pension payments are fixed, your healthcare costs are not. Right? We have a defined pension plan, right? So when you retire, you're getting that amount every month,
Correct.
whereas healthcare costs are going up every year. So even though the pension fund is less well funded than the health fund, if you were gonna do that, I might make the argument to continue overfunding health, just because you know what you're doing on the pension side.
That's Jen, we'd like to look at both, please.
Yeah, so I'll reach out to Amy to find
Okay.
out what those numbers look like, the surplus numbers in this, and we can do some projections as to if you were to put that money into different funds and what the impact would be on the contributions going forward.
And then Jen was just gonna follow up on the page 20. We couldn't figure out what happened in 2022, so if you could just go back to that, us on that as well.
I'll look that up and let Amy know, and she can relay the message.
Any other questions?
Not here.
I say that was very helpful, and if you were gonna say something to the public, this is a positive development.
This is extremely positive development. Like I said, this is where every town in Connecticut wishes they were at.
And it's a way to return some of the tax payments back to the taxpayers as
Right.
an offset in the future.
Can allow, so one of the main reasons for funding an OPEB trust and then utilizing it is to have that concept of intergenerational equity, right? You want the right generation of taxpayers paying for the benefits that are being provided to them right now, the services that are being provided to them right now, right? And when you're doing a pay-as-you-go basis, you're paying retirees that no longer work for the town and aren't providing services, so that there's a disconnect there, right? So by utilizing the trust, the money that went to the trust from prior taxpayer dollars is now paying for benefits for prior services. So it's more in line there with that compact there.
Makes sense.
Okay, so our target is to get you the information you need in September so that we can get the information we need in December.
All right.
All right, that's awesome. Thank you very much. That was very
Thank you.
well done and very helpful.
Thank you.
I should have checked. Does anyone have any other questions? Sorry. Okay, thank you.
I'll see you all in
Thanks,
December
Jen.
then.
You're welcome to
Jen.
stay.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Very helpful. we have finance director's report.
Is that your fault or did you leave it?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Okay, so on page 1, you'll have your supplemental appropriations, which we have not added to since the last meeting. Right under that, you'll see that there's a new section. Lisa had requested we added in all of our approved tax abatements and then the fiscal impact for the current fiscal year. So right now we have 2 signed off abatements where we are halfway through the abatement. Both of the contracts or the agreements I should say are within year 5 of 10. And then the tax reduction overall for the fiscal year 25 grand list was just shy over $100,000. I believe that there's one more coming, they just haven't signed the agreement yet, so that will probably be updated for next month.
What is that for?
It was, I think it's the second EBAD one, yeah, it was the second EBAD one that they did and I think it was before you now.
We're all before me.
Well, they were
I
all
haven't done
before
one.
you, but I mean, it's been hanging out for a long time between going back and forth between the attorneys, so it hasn't been finalized yet.
And Solectron is Metro Beast building.
Yes.
Mark and Ika Scully's building,
Yes.
Metro Beast rents from them.
Right.
Yes, correct.
I think Courtney and Chris would love to own that building, but I think Mark and Ika would not wanna sell it.
Yes.
On the grants, just 2 quick updates on the 2 pending grants. The Brownfield grant, we're expecting to hear back in June. And then the Connecticut DOT, that micro grant for transportation was awarded post completing this report. So that will be going up to the awarded section for next month. Moving down on the same page, page 2 to the pooled investments. Just wanted to point out that we are starting to see those investment rates coming down. We were notified by our bank on April 15th that they were reducing our rate from 4.15 down to 4%. And that's pretty much it.
Were you able to get us the summary of the line items?
No, I'll have to send it along tomorrow or by the end of the week. I had meetings today, I couldn't fit it in.
Okay. One of the things I sent everyone an email, we're gonna start to look at our monthly reports and quarterly reports and work with the Board of Ed to try and get them at the same time. It doesn't make sense to look at one time and the other the next when they're related and they impact each other, so we'll try and get similar form. I'm gonna meet with Matt and Amy, but if there's anyone who has an interest in formatting in Excel, feel free to jump in, let me know. I don't have to put you on the spot here today. I am gonna put Art Wallace on the spot just a little bit. There may be some subcommittee work on capital with representatives from this board, the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Ed, and I have a wedding this summer, so I do not have a lot of time. I just happened to mention that to Art and he said he's available, so if there's no objection, I'm happy to let them. We'll do a workshop hopefully in June or July. I sent you some information on that. Ooh, that was exciting. About things that we'll discuss, so take a look at that. We wanna do that before we send Art as a representative, make sure we're all on the same page before he represents our board, so we'll get that. But that'll be hopefully in the engineering room with pizza and lots of Excel and computers, so kind of boring for the public, but hopefully we can make some progress there. And I talked with Mark in advance about the issues that we would do, and I know Mark is looking to do joint tri-board evaluation as well, so there may be larger discussions, cause it does make sense if we're gonna do a major planning to make sure all 3 boards are swimming in the same direction, because if we do decide to do a major project within 10 years, we're gonna have to take steps now to get us ready for that, and there has to be a commitment from the 3 boards to do that, and that means taking some steps will mean sacrificing other things, so we just need to make sure everyone agrees that that's what we wanna do. If it's not in agreement, then we'll switch gears, of course. Okay, are you ready for the big, exciting? I don't know if folks saw the fire district did pass their mill last night and it's 1.14, I think, Amy, right? Okay, correct. As anticipated, is that correct, or is that a little lower?
No, that was anticipated.
Do you wanna walk us through the mill rate setting?
So this is what we do post budget referendum every year. You all finalize the mill rate. Typically, it's what has been presented at the last public hearing that we use for our assumptions. So in this case, our mill rate that we've used throughout the budget process and the final gross expenditures and then net expenditures to get to our anticipated property tax number, we used an estimated mill rate of 33.02. So if you all would like to stick with that plan, if you will, you'll set the mill rate for 33.02 on your real estate and your personal property. And then as you're aware, we have to set a separate mill rate for our motor vehicle at 32.46, which is the state cap.
Amy, is there anything material this board should be aware of in terms of revenue losses that have occurred since the last time we met, or that potentiality there?
There is nothing that has occurred. I had for later on in my report, but the state of Connecticut budget related to the special ed and the ECS that you had sent out earlier, they are in talks of potential changes for that, so.
At this point, that's not something we should react to.
At this point, we don't have any additional information.
Which is why, we have a solid reserve level, and we're preserving that. It's part of the reason we use the health insurance reserve, so we can preserve general fund dollars if needed. So we'll be monitoring that. As you get updates, Mark and Amy, could you please forward those along to us? Thank you. Okay, with that, are there questions for Amy or Mark? May I have a motion effective May 13, 2025 to set the real estate and personal property mill rate for fiscal year 2025-2026 at 33.02 mils.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. May I have a motion effective May 13, 2025 to set the motor vehicle mill rate for fiscal year 2025-2026 at 32.46 mils.
So moved. Second.
Art moves, Bert second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, the motion carries unanimously. Okay, we have a supplemental appropriation for Green Water, which did not make it into the budget. We did get advised that it was, those numbers were available, but we'd already gotten the bonding numbers, so to make that change would have been a tremendous amount of work. There is no impact to the taxpayer, but anything we can do next year to get that in the budget, much better.
Definitely.
Okay, that would be great. Amy, just for the public, why don't you walk us through what this is and why there's no impact to the taxpayer?
Sure. So we work with Aquarian on the Aquarian project. So this project in particular was a 2024 water main replacement that they had done. And instead of them contracting out with their own paving company, we coordinate our paving program to coincide with where they're doing their work. So they will pay us for the reimbursement of the paving that we do on their behalf.
This is, I think, the third or fourth time we've seen this. I don't know if the board has any questions on that. And again, just for members of the public who may be watching, there is no impact to the taxpayer on this. The money comes from Aquarian, it's spent on their behalf. And we get reimbursed for town efforts. Okay, I have a motion effective May 13th, 2025 to approve a supplemental appropriation for the town's pavement management program in the amount of $282,500.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 The motion carries unanimously. Okay, next we have the tax collector suspense list. This is one of our state obligations. This is required by the state. It is one of the duties that we as a board have. It's required by Connecticut General Statutes Chapter 204, Section 12-165. The tax collector must at least once in each year for each municipality deliver to the Board of Finance the tax suspension list. What is included in the suspension list is also required by state statutes. There's an interesting component in there. It says it shall be published in the next annual report of the municipality or filed in the town clerk's office within 60 days. We just did the annual report and we file it at the town clerk's as opposed to including it in the annual report, but just wanted to bring that to your attention. I assume no one wants to make a change there. Amy, can you just tell us broadly what this is for members of the public and why the public might care about this?
Yeah, sure. So the suspense list are essentially uncollectible receivables, or in this case, uncollectible taxes. The majority of them are typically motor vehicle related to the regular motor vehicle tax schedule, and then also the supplemental motor vehicle tax schedule. All of the motor vehicles have to, if they go to register a vehicle, they won't be able to register their vehicle until they pay their taxes. Right now, we have an advantage with the new license requirement where you have to have the verified license. So we have actually seen an uptick on our delinquent motor vehicle taxes because as people go to get their licenses, they have to pay their taxes. So this will remain on the books for 15 years and then it will truly be uncollectible and would have to be written off. All of the personal property taxes, we have a state marshal that goes out to do collections for us. So anything that is collectible for personal property taxes has already been turned over to the state marshal and he is working on those collections.
Okay, any questions on the tax?
It's a small amount, but is this amount like part of what we assume when we assume like the 98.5%, like that stuff? Okay.
Yeah, what is our tax collection assumption rate on motor vehicles? Is that different than on personal property?
No, we do the whole thing. No, that's not true. I think we do have, I think that's assumed at 100%. The real estate is what's 98.5%. And then we do a small offset for uncollectible.
So instead of doing the tax collection assumption rate, you assume an uncollectible portion as part of your calculation.
And this
So-
is in line with that assumption?
Yeah, I think it was like 150,000, so this is under, yep.
What's the advantage to that versus adjusting the assumption rate?
It's just how it's always been done. Just follow prior year practice.
And if you did an assumption rate, you'd just base it on the 150 anyway, probably, right?
Yeah, I
So you'd
mean,
end up in
It's
the
been
same
so
place.
close, yeah.
Are there any predominant reasons why they're not paid? Is it negligence or can't afford it or
Typically
or
people,
clerical error or what
no,
is it?
typically people move
People move?
and then we can't find them.
yeah,
Particularly out of
start looking
state.
at these addresses and they're in Massachusetts and California and Florida and
That's interesting.
Maine.
Maine.
And it's not worth it to send somebody out there at some point, right?
We do have a collection contract, right? Tax service is
We do.
So, you know, like in Hartford, we use a collection agency to go and try to reach them. And I think where that's quite helpful is with the out-of-state ones that aren't captured by the inability to re-register your car in Connecticut. So you tend to find on motor vehicle suspense lists that more than half of them are no longer in the state of Connecticut in the first place, right? And then typically, I don't have this list in front of me, but by statute, the obligation survives for 15 years, but typically municipalities don't move it to suspense until it's 5, 6, or 7 years old already. I don't know what the grand list is on there, but the 15 years that Amy references is from the grand list, not from the date you move it to suspense. What's interesting to me is how much of the money that's been moved to suspense is collected, and we'll be looking at that to see if there's anything else we can do to
Do you
squeeze
know
that.
what percentage that is?
I don't yet. I do know that in Hartford, we got council approval for an amnesty program that collected over $3 million in delinquent motor vehicle taxes for the city of Hartford in a course of about 6 months. Won a statewide award for that while I was there, and didn't cost the city anything because the collection agency charges 15%. And so what we had essentially what they did was they agreed not to charge the 15%. So the amnesty was on the agency in return for renewing their contract. And Hartford made $3 million.
What is the total amount on the suspense? So this is just for this year, right?
I don't have it.
Suspense?
We can get that to you, Chair. That's an interesting number.
Yeah, that would be interesting to see, cause it might make sense to,
It's one thing you can do. I doubt it would generate 3 million in Simsbury.
if it does 500,000, suddenly we're at $1 million to the positive.
Aren't these the totals at the end of the
That's just for this year that
Just
we
for
moved to
this year.
suspense. Each year we move some to
yeah,
suspense.
and the newest thing on this list is from 2022, right? So there's other stuff that hasn't made it to this yet. It's coming.
If I see one name I know, I can try to collect it from you.
15%.
One at a time.
Okay, and may I have a motion effective May 13, 2025 to approve the suspense list in the amount of $86,471.34 and authorize the tax collector Sherry Clemens to transfer these accounts to the suspense tax book and file with the town clerk.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
I did speak with Amy, the town clerk, the tax collector and the assessor have to file multiple reports with OPM. And in the past, we've gotten the list of exemptions or June, May 1, those got extended to June, so we'll get that report at our next meeting. But at some point, we should take a look at all the reports files, see if there are any other reports we wanna review, because there's some interesting information out there. We've traditionally done the suspense because we're prior to exemptions because of this. These MME or MMRE, I don't even know what that is, the machinery exemption, which is about 300,000. Might be worth looking, because we do have a relatively high number of exempt properties in town compared to our neighbors, or we did the last OPM. Municipal fiscal indicators, we were higher than our neighbors except for Farmington, so it's worth tracking that, paying attention to that. Okay, moving on to appointment of the auditor. This is another statutory requirement that we have and a charter requirement. This board is required by OPM, state statutes, and Simsbury Town Charter to appoint an independent auditor each year. We'll be appointing, I assume, Clifton Arson, we have a contract for 3 years with an option to extend for additional 2. This will be year 2 of the current contract, so not an extension. Amy, is it your recommendation that we continue with the current auditor?
Yeah, so we have one update. Our current partner, Jessica Aniskoff, called me last week. She will be leaving the firm. So we have Vanessa Rosito, who was our prior partner on the job. She is going to be partial on the account this year, and then Dave Flint is also gonna be partial on the account, and then she will transition it over to Dave Flint for next year. So we'll get a fresh set of eyes on the books.
Has Vanessa done our audit in the past?
She was the partner prior to Jess.
Yeah, so the reason why we change auditors, this is kind of not great, because we wanna make sure we get new auditors' eyes on it, but
Right, but she needs to get Dave up to speed.
okay. And then after that, it will be transitioned to the new partner.
Right, we won't have 2 partners, it'll just be Dave.
People comfortable with that? Where did Jessica go?
I don't know. I think she's going out on her own, if I were to guess.
If we weren't comfortable with it, what could we do if we're in the second year of a 3-year contract?
Well, it's dependent on Board of Finance approval, because we can't approve a multi-year
Oh, so it's
contract.
okay.
I mean, you could request that Dave just take over the account and work with Brandon. You didn't want Vanessa on it.
No, I am comfortable.
Any questions? Okay. May I have a motion effective May 13, 2025 to appoint Clifton Larson Allen as the town of Simsbury's auditors for fiscal year audit ending 2024-2025 and to authorize the finance director to file the same with the appropriate state officials.
I'll second it.
First by Art, second by Mike. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously. Okay, we're moving on to Board of Education quarterly report.
So this is the third quarter report ending March 31st, 2025. I don't think that there were any major changes to the grant since the last quarter. The only thing that I did have highlighted to point out is that third bullet down, the special education placements and excess cost, which I alluded to earlier, that we received an email correspondence from Cost Today related to the state appropriations, that although the state appropriations committee had passed the increased funding for ECS and excess costs, they are now relooking at it. So that's something that we are going to keep an eye on for fiscal year 26. For fiscal year 25, initially we had said that we were expecting a preliminary reimbursement of $2 million, and now they had approved the additional funding that we were anticipated to lose, so we're expected to get what we originally had budgeted for, which was about 2.4 million in excess cost funding.
I mean, what are we sort of projecting on overage in this area? I know the last quarterly for the town, we're projecting about 400 overage on the Board of Ed, conservative numbers, but how much of that is made up from special education and
At
versus
400,000. So the above and beyond the 400,000 was about $200,000 in electricity. But we had some terminations in the operation in the facilities department that kind of is offsetting that number right now. So it really is all special education.
So Amy, was there an additional 400 that came to light? Because during the budget process, we thought there was gonna be a 400 overage, then we got reimbursed by the state an additional 400, and now we're looking at 400 overage, so that feels to me like an 800?
I don't know, I'd have to go back and look at Melissa's projections for the 400. I don't know if the students changed because they're constantly updating, or if it was the transportation related to the students, but I can find out the difference.
State law requires the Board of Ed, if they're gonna have an overage, to come to us in advance, so they have not come to us, so we're gonna work on the working assumption that they will use their non-lapsing fund to take care of the overage. They are not allowed to overspend the bottom line. They can tap, I believe the law is, Amy, now that they can tap non-lapsing without coming to us for that purpose.
Correct.
Okay, and because they haven't come to us, that will be our expectation. Okay. You wanna keep going?
Moving on to the expenditures under the general control. A lot of these categories, if you will, it's the timing of the payments that were made sooner in the year. So audit services, for example, our audit was done sooner this year, so we had to pay out sooner. The things that are not related to timing, so under general control, is our increased legal expenditures for special education. We had a couple of larger cases this year that required additional legal funds. Under instruction, this was just more of an accounting change that you might have noticed during the fiscal year 26 budget process. All of our salaries for grant related individuals are charged to the general fund, and then we would move them over into the grant fund. The same thing is happening this year, except we built in an offset in the general fund. So that just looks a little off, but it's the same thing year to year. It's just how we're accounting for it. And then under the operation of plant, again, is our increase in our electricity costs, which is then will be offset in the I believe it'll be offset by the end of the year with the terminations that we are currently working through. The out of district tuition, I will get you the difference in the tuition and transportations based on the prior quarter projections compared to this one. And the equipment new replacement, it looks like we are at 0 right now. That's just because we have a $400,000 grant offset to this line item that we just haven't reached yet, but that will anticipated to be in line with the prior year. So again, that's just a
they had budgeted minus 52 on that, so why would it be in line with the last year?
What do you mean minus 52?
Under the budget passed by the Board of Ed on the equipment thing, where was that? There was a negative 32 budget. On equipment replacement and new, that was a negative budget because they were gonna use the balance. So they were actually not budgeting anything, negative 52, so why would it be 108?
I'd have to look at what you're
Okay.
looking at, cause typically we have, I think it's about 600,000 in equipment, and then we offset using a grant of 400,000. It usually ends up being around 200,000, and then I think in 25 we brought it down to 100,000. So if you could send me what you're looking at, I can take a look.
One of the things Amy and I discovered is that when the Board of Ed approves their budget and it's posted online, it's different numbers than what we're seeing here. This is an alternative budget. And the reason why these numbers don't look like the numbers that are approved by the Board of Ed is Munis was confusing the things. So that's one of the reasons one of the things we wanna get cleaned up going forward, because obviously it's a best practice to use the same numbers. If a resident looks online and looked at this, they would see different numbers. Amy has confirmed that no amendments to their budget have been done, so it's just a matter of how the numbers have been entered into the spreadsheet. So we're gonna try and, that's one of the things we're gonna try and clean up. And actually, Board of Ed is actually required to post projections on their website quarterly, so we'll add a, projection lines. Just clean it up, try and get it in the same form. It doesn't make sense to use two forms for the budget. For our review, if they wanna do it separately for their review, totally fine. But for us, we should use the same form so that we can see the whole picture. You'll notice this doesn't show the deficit of 400,000 that we saw last year. So if we got the reports together, you might see it together, but because we look at it so off cycle, we're missing some of the, I think, story there. So just to try and get it all, so that we get it at the same time, same form, so that it's easy to do. Those are the things we'll be looking to improve. But take a look at, I think our quarterly report is very good, but if anyone wants to make any changes there, let us know. We asked Amy for the quarterly to show line item detail in the tax department, because we're following those numbers pretty closely. And just as a reminder, when we do year-end close, we'll get the line item detail for that one report. And Amy, assuming we're not gonna do a quarterly, we're just gonna do the year-end close in September. Okay. Folks comfortable with that? We'll still get the monthly reports. We'll have a monthly in June. All right, folks are good with that? Okay. Okay, you wanna keep going?
That was all I had for major highlights. Just as you had mentioned, there's that last box on page 26 that shows the non-lapsing that I'm guessing the Board of Education will approve the use of if we do go into that deficit of 400,000.
Amy, how much did we budget out of that amount to use for 2026?
I don't think we did for 2026. I think was 25 the last year? I don't know, I'd have to look. I think 25 was the last year of our plan, and then 26 we didn't have a plan for.
So that would be all unassigned and available to make up the potential deficit.
Right.
We're still optimistic that that deficit will go down.
Sure.
Okay.
I don't know, to be determined. See what happens with the special ed.
Any other questions? Okay. We'll go on to minutes. I sent some minor changes to Amy, copied all of you in advance. Got the one question Amy had figured out, number 9, but if there's no objection, we'll go ahead and accept the minutes. Or I'll ask for a motion to approve the April 8th.
I move that we approve the minutes of April 8th, 2025, subject to the corrections that were circulated earlier today.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously.
I move that we approve
thank
the
you.
minutes of April 22nd, 2025, subject to any corrections that were circulated today.
I'll second that.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
I move to adjourn.
Was there anything else gonna go in the order? All right, is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone.
For over 40 years, SCM has been the voice of our town,
bringing us together through local programming,
education, and live broadcasts.
SCM isn't just about television.
It's about empowering our community,
ensuring our voices are heard during government meetings,
and celebrating milestones
like our high school graduations.
But today, SCM faces a challenge.
Our funding structure is based on television subscriptions.
And it's no secret, people have been cutting the cord.
With a shift to internet-only subscriptions,
SCM receives less revenue,
even though all our programming is freely available online.
We need your support.
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 Your donation can make a difference.
It will ensure that SCM remains open,
continues to educate our youth,
and keeps our community informed.
Thanks to SCM, I've been honing my creative skills, helping me work towards my college degree.
SCM is crucial for keeping our community connected.
SCM isn't just here to broadcast local events. They're actively preserving Simsbury's history.
Join us.
Join us in preserving Simsbury's voice.
Simsbury's voice.
Together we can ensure that SCM continues to thrive
for generations to come.
Visit our website
or scan the QR code on your screen to make your donation.
Every contribution
counts.
Thank you for supporting Simsbury Community Media,
where your town,
your schools,
and your government come together.